Okay, so for students who've just come in, please download from Blackboard. We'll need a database file. So what we are doing here today is we are going to work with databases. All of us know what a database is. So files, of course, are permanent storage, but files are usually used when you're not working with large volumes of data. And all files are processed on your own local machines, right? Even if your files are kept on a server, all the processing of files is still done in your code. On the other hand, databases are used. What is a database? We'll be working with a relational database. So a relational database is a collection of related tables, and each table describes an entity. So if I wanted to create a database for, say, Georgian College, I would have a table for students, a table for teachers, maybe a table for non-teaching staff, a table for maybe labs, table for suppliers. Like there's so many entities that are involved in Georgian College. And each of this entity will have a table of its own. And in this table, I'll be keeping the information about that entity, right? That's how it works. Okay, so that's what a relational database is. So what I've done is I have posted on Blackboard a few chapters for you, again, PowerPoint slides for you. And they'll give you a rough, I mean, not a rough idea, a good idea, or they're kind of a review for your relational database. So they're called, I think they're called 17, 18, and 19, right? So I'll very quickly go through them and I'll refer to them as and when I do the practical example today. So which database server will we be using? What will we be using? Which database management system? So I'm not sure if you remember, but it's not so far off. In your first semester and maybe in your second too, you did use MySQL, right? So I use MySQL when I teach those students databases. So MySQL is a free SQL relational database server out there. So all you do is you install it on your local machine. So your own machine becomes a database server. You have your own DBMS, your database management system. And you are capable of creating databases and tables therein on your own local machine and work with them, right? That's what I did. And I'm not sure what you used. Of course, the option is you use a database on an remote server, Azure. For example, Visual Studio, you could save your stuff, or DreamHost, right? You could save your, you could use a database server on a remote machine, and just use it on a remote server. You could do that too. There are some problems going on with Azure right now. It was fine till last, I don't know, summer it was okay. It was fine. I used it in summer, I remember. But then they've changed some policies and so on. So it's quite messy right now. So it doesn't matter what you use. The concepts don't change. How you work doesn't change. The only difference is your tables or your database is not on your local machine, but it is on a remote machine. And that's definitely an advantage, right? Because if it's on a remote machine and Azure has all the facilities of database server and also it's a web server and so on. So you could use it, your files are sitting there and you could just use it in another application of web server also, a web program also. So I'm not using Azure. Visual Studio 2015 has the option of using Azure. It's just not working from what I hear from my colleagues. So I'll just leave it alone, okay? But as I said, the concept doesn't change. What you're learning doesn't change. So this chapter very quickly will give you an introduction to database programming. So what am I using? I'm not going to install MySQL on my local machine. When you did install Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise or Professional Edition, whatever you've installed on your machine, was also installed for you a local MS SQL server, right? So Microsoft's SQL server has been installed on your machine. So you do have a database server on your machine, whether you know about it or not. Okay, so it is there. It's there, and we will use that server. It's a scaled down version of MS SQL server, but it's enough for us. So we will use that server to work with databases on our local machine. So if you have installed it, it should be there and it should be running. So I'll show you how to connect to that database server, how to use a database file, and then how to create forms that will use data from a database. Very easy, but of course, you can always change that stuff as and how you like. So I'll show you how to work with it. So for that purpose, you can do two things. You can create a database yourself on your local machine, like you do using MySQL or whatever you've used in your semester 1 and 2 with your database courses. Or you can use a database that is already created and is compatible with MS SQL. So I'll use a file today. Already I've given you a file today. And maybe next week, if I go with creating the entity, using the entity framework, I'll show you how to create a database using MS SQL, right? The SQL server for Microsoft. So the database file that we will be working with today, I have posted it on Blackboard. So if students who've come in late, it's on Blackboard, weekly learning, start files, and it's called database.mdf, something to do with right? The name of the company or whatever they are calling it. So I've given two versions. I had to change the file that I got from the website for my instructor's website was not working. I had to upgrade it. It was with an older version of SQL, MS SQL. So it was not a big deal. I updated it, so I gave you the updated one also. Okay, so if you have a problem when you try to connect, it will ask you, shall I update it? And say yes, and it just updates it. Okay, so just in case if you're using some other older version of Visual Studio, which I don't think you're using because I haven't seen it in the assignments that I got, then I've also given you the older version. Okay, once updated, you can't use it with the old version of Visual Studio or server. So I gave you both the files. I didn't know what you had on your systems, but I will use the newer version. I know the newer version works. Okay, so what is our aim? Our aim is to connect to the running database server on our machine, to add a data source, and this data source is the MDF file I've given you. It's only compatible with MS SQL. You can't do it with MySQL server. So I've given you that SQL file. There is a database there. I'll show you what's the database. I'll show you what are the tables inside it so that you have a general idea. And hopefully you can remember what tables are, what fields are in a table, what are foreign keys, primary keys, and so on and so forth. All that you've done in your previous two courses. Sorry? Yes, we will be using that MDF file in Visual Studio. We will be. So I'll show you the structure of that MDF file, right? So this chapter, which I've put up, is kind of a review of your how to use it. So for your information, we will be using the ADO.NET, the data adapter, command connection, everything we'll be using. So this is how it works. See, you are on a client machine. Your database is on a server. Right now, that server is our local machine, but your database is on our server. So you do need some software that will connect you to the server, whether it's on the same local machine, doesn't matter. This connecting software is the ADO.NET, ActiveX Data Controls, right? Objects. So this is already in your Visual Studio 2015. You already have it. It's called ADO.NET. So we will learn how to use ADO.NET, which has, I'll show you when I go through these slides, the components it has, which will help you to connect your program, your commands that you give in SQL to a table on the server, right? So you need this ADO.NET, which again is available in Visual Studio 2015, right? So before ADO.NET, I forget what it was called, but there was a previous server, there was a previous software. It's no longer in use. This is much more powerful. And therefore, of course, it's what is available. On top of it, entity framework, a template framework is also provided now, which you could use as a next step. So if you're fine with ADO.NET, there's nothing wrong in it. It's perfectly fine. But of course, if something new comes up and it makes the programmer's job easy, programmers will definitely tend to use that framework. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that next week if I do. So basically, I'll be telling you what a multi-user system is, the client server model, if you are aware of it, what are relational databases, the SQL statements. I won't go through them. Select, insert, update, and delete are SQL statements that you should know. The use of ADO.NET, because that's what we'll be using, the data adapter, command connection, and so on. And then kind of compare how a data set that you create is same as relational. So I'll kind of use an example to do this. We'll also talk about concurrency in a database. I'm not sure if you know what concurrency is. Concurrency means, suppose you have a table in a database and two users at the same time are trying to update a row, the same row in a database. Of course, that will create problems. That's called a concurrency problem, right? That's what it is, because user 1 is trying to update it, user 2 is trying to update it. Cannot happen, right? Because one of them will of course update maybe even a split second before, and then the other one was trying to update the old record, but now there is a new record. These are concurrency problems, and database servers, DBMS systems, database management systems take care of it. So I'm not sure, you've done your advanced relational database course also, right? I'm hoping you learned something about it in that course. But ADO.NET, though not the best, ADO.NET does do some kind of optimistic concurrency control. What it does is this. This is what happens. When you connect to a database, the data from the table or tables is taken and put in a data set that you work with in your program, right, in your code. And the connection with the database is closed. So you're not working with the database at all given times. When you try to add or update or delete a record, that means do any change, then the connection is made again and the change is done. But what ADO.NET does before it makes the change, like updates or delete a record, it checks, did anything change from the last time when I picked up the record? So if a record was picked up and suppose some other user has changed it in that time when you were working in your own application, and now you try to update it in your application, it will say, oh, that record got changed. It is different from what it was before, and it will not let you do it. So that's how it takes care of concurrency problems. That's how ADO.NET takes care of it. And this is called optimistic concurrency. So it's not 100% perfect, but it does take care. So you'll say, oh, something has changed before I took data. So it kind of works this way. It takes the data and then closes the connection. You're working with your data set and whatever, but as soon as you do something to the data set, if you're only browsing, that's fine. But if you add a new record, if you delete a record, if you update a record and you go save, it again makes a connection with the database. But before it does that update physically on the table in the database, it checks, has something changed from the last time I picked up that record? And if it has changed, it will throw an exception, and we should know how to catch that exception. Otherwise, of course, you'll have problems. So you will learn how to catch these exceptions like we've been doing, and then it will say that a concurrency problem occurred. I'll show you how it works. Okay, I'll create an application and I'll run 2 instances of it on my machine. I'll update a record from one instance and then I'll try to update it from another, and I'll show you how it works. I'll try to show you how it works. Okay. Okay, having said that, so I'll show you, and it's called optimistic concurrency control. But anyway, we'll talk about it when it comes. So this is how a client server system basically works, right? So you have clients through the network, you connect to a database server, and the work is divided. It's not like files that all the processing takes on place on the client machine, even if the files are on a server. So this processing is kind of divided. So some processing takes place on the client machine and some processing takes place on the server machine. Therefore, this is called client server system, right? So some processing of your database takes place on your machine and then some on the server. So that's what I said. That's the connection in between. The ADO.NET is the software that is working on machines. So this is how a simple client server database model looks like. That's how it looks like, right? So you have a database server running somewhere. So for example, Azure. So there's a database server running there and you have your database saved there and you're kind of connecting to it, making a connection and then working with it. Or on DreamHost, right? DreamHost also has MySQL running on it. So if you don't want to create a DreamHost SQL server on your own machine, you could use the one on DreamHost. So I'm keeping away from a database server just because Azure isn't working, something that Visual Studio kind of lets you do it, but you'll definitely work with it next semester. Hopefully things will get better, right? So from what I've heard from my colleagues, Rich and Tom, and they're saying something is going on there. Let's wait, let them settle down, and then we'll kind of go back to it. So you will see it. So it's not a big deal, right? So the clients can be any machines. The server is a computer that stores the files and databases. It's called a database server, and the network consists of cabling, communication lines, and so on. Okay, so those are the hardware components. And then of course, LAN and WAN and all that enterprise systems, you can kind of read about it. It's not so important to me, but I mean, it's in the background, but that's what it is. So this is how it works. You give an SQL query. So you do selects, updates, deletes, whatever. It goes to the database server, kind of works on the tables here, and the results are given back to you, right? So your client needs some software to work with the database on this machine. And the database server needs a network operating system, will need a database management system, of course, DBMS, and then we'll need a database. So the DBMS that we are using is MS SQL on your machine. Okay, MySQL is another example of a DBMS. And of course, on your client machine, you will require some data access API. And this is the ADO.NET that I'm talking about, right? It is the data access API. So you're accessing the data on the server using ADO.NET, okay? So of course you need an operating. So this is what we are using. Like we are using ADO.NET. 4.5 is what we're using. So if you have an older version, which I'm hoping you don't, then you need an older version of your file. So we'll be using SQL, structured query language. Again, I'm not going through it. You know what it is, and I'll use it, but I'm hoping you know it, right? So this is what they have given to us is an MMA books database, right? So this database has a few tables. So let me show you wherever the tables are. So there are a few tables in that database. For example, here is an example of a product data table inside your database. So this MDF file that you have from me, is a database file. There is a database already created for you, which is compatible with MS SQL. And inside that database are some tables. Product is an example of one of the tables. Invoice is an example of another table. Invoice line items is another table, customer is another table, and so on, right? So kind of somewhere they will, here it is, right? So somewhere they'll give you an idea of So I was trying to see if I can zoom it or something. Zoom in. Oh. So it should say plus, right? I should be able to just move my mouse and there it is here. So just to give you an idea. So these are the tables that are already available. Notice how so customer table, let's take a simple table. The customer table has these fields, customer ID, which is a primary key, right? Hopefully you know all primary key, the name of the customer, the address of the customer, city, state, and zip code. This table is related to invoices. Every customer has one or more invoices. Do you see this relationship? One to many relationship. So a customer has bought some products, right? And he or she may have one or more invoices. So each invoice has a customer ID in it, which connects it to this customer. So the relationship is one to many. So here is the invoice detail, the invoice ID, the customer ID, date, and so on. And then not everything is important to me. I won't use all of them, but kind of look at it. Products has a product code, a description, a unit price, and a on-hand quantity. And this product is related to invoice line items, which is related to invoices, because a user may buy one or more products, and each user has an invoice, and that invoice is further related to an invoice line items, where information about every product that has been bought is given. And then the state information here, this is something they just did it. It wasn't required, but it will come handy when I show you something today. So the state is mentioned here. The state here is just this is US, right? So it's state. The state is a two-lettered word, two-lettered abbreviation, and its full name is available in this table called state. Okay, I can show you all these tables. We can see all these tables through MS SQL. You can just preview all of these tables. So this is the feature of your database. So this is what I have already given to you. Okay. So we will be using the customers table today, maybe. I mean, I can use any table because I want to show you a few things, but I'll be using the customers table. I'll be using the states table, maybe the invoices table, but they're just tables, right? And we'll be able to see information in it. So this is the MMA books database I've provided you with. .mdf compatible with my MS SQL server. Okay, so that's what I've given to you. It's already created and made. So these are just select statements, which I'm not going to go through with you at all. I'm hoping you remember your statements. So the rest of this chapter talks about select, update, and so on. What is important to us is also this. So here are the objects available through the API, the ADO.NET. So we should be able to make a connection to the database. We should be able to give a command like select, update, or delete. The data reader object provides a read-only, forward-only access to data in a database. I'll show you when and how it is created. And a data adapter that provides a link between the command and the connection. So keep them in mind. Of course, you can't remember them. When I do something, I'll tell you. So here are these three providers in your ADO.NET. So you have a provider for SQL Server, which we will use. You also can use in Visual Studio an OLEDB, an OLE database, and you have a provider for that also. So any database that supports OLEDB you can use it in Visual Studio 2015. Any database that supports ODBC, you can also use that database in Visual 2015. Visual 2015 does have a connection, a provider for Oracle, but they are deprecating it. So they're saying don't use it anymore. But they're third party. So if you want to use a database that does not have a provider in Visual Studio 2015, all you'll have to do is you'll have to get the software for it, right? And then you'll have to install it in Visual Studio 2015 and then you use it. Okay, but I'll use the SQL Server. That's what I'm going to use. And of course, each of these servers will give you the 4 objects that I was talking about. You will know how to do a connection object, how to create one. And you know what? It's mostly drag and drop in databases. It's easy. And of course, we'll look into the code afterwards. It allows you to give a command. You should be able to write SQL commands. It gives you a data reader object and a data adapter object. So all 4 provide you with these 4 objects that we need. And that's what they're called: SQL connection, SQL command, SQL data reader, and adapter. And this is the using statement we will need to put in our code if we want to use the SQL provider. Okay, so we'll remember to put that. And I'll show you how to use it. It's not a big thing. So these are your components. So here is your database server, which is your machine. It could be any remote database server. Here is what's happening on your machine on the client side. So data sets are created. These data sets have data tables whose data has been retrieved from the database tables using your net data provider, whatever you're using, right? So you make a connection, you give commands, and then a data adapter takes the data from here and pushes it here. And then the connection is closed. It's called a closed connection configuration. And all that you do here is on your client machine works, but anytime you make a change, it goes back, makes a connection again, and tries to update or delete or do whatever you want. Okay, but the connection is closed connection. So this is how it works, kind of like. So 2 users could be working with the same copies of the data, as I said, and they could be making changes. And when they make changes and try to put it back on the database, you could have concurrency problems, and that will be handled, right? So he talks about concurrency here, and I'll show you. So ADO.NET does provide optimistic concurrency. So it checks that, oh, the row has not changed from where it was, and it throws a concurrency exception. So it's your job to see that you write a try catch and you know that something is happening. Okay, so that it does give you some concurrency control, not complete, but some. I'll show you how to do it, and how to avoid it is, it rarely occurs, but it does. Then sometimes this is more than enough, but if it is a problem, then you have to kind of take care of a few more things that's beyond our course, but it is available, right? So having said that, when I have to come back, I'll come back to it. Okay, so I won't need 17, but I'll need 18 and 19. And I'll come back to it as and when time requires. So now begin. Open up your Visual Studio 2015. So notice how we have a connect to Azure right here. So you have an option of, and Visual Studio, this is new in Visual Studio 2015. And it was working perfectly fine till summer, till they made some changes to the what should I say? It's not to Azure or Visual Studio 2015. They made changes to how users can basically use Azure, right? So some changes were made. Before it was free and it was easy, and I remember doing it last year for some other course, of course, but something happened in summer, almost end of summer, and it's kind of still not settled down. So that's why we all are trying to keep away from Azure till Microsoft kind of makes a deal, right? And then we'll kind of go and start using it. Okay, so we'll start a new project. So go a new project. So we'll just start a new project. So I've not given you anything at all, okay? So you're just doing it from scratch. And it will be a Windows Form application, of course. and you can call it whatever. I'm going to call it database example, maybe. I'll keep putting it on Git too, right? And I'll put it on wherever I want it. You put it where you want it, just so that I know that I did it with you. Right, and this will go on Git. Remember, if you have to kind of put it on Git, the best way to do is create a new Git repository right here. Check it here. If you don't do it here, you can do it afterwards also. There is an option somewhere in one of the menus, which I forget, I think in file or whatever. But you know what? I found that this is the easiest and the best way to make a connection. Otherwise, at least on my system, it creates all havoc. So I don't try to do it. And so all I'm doing is I'm creating a Windows Forms application as you've done before. I've just given it a name, put it wherever I want it, and I've said I want to create a new Git repository for it. You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, and do an OK. Right, so now this form, of course, as and how I need it, I need something like this, and the usual stuff you will do with your form as you do, right? So what do you do with your usual form? Definitely we change its text, for example. Oh, let's change its name first. I mean, it doesn't matter what you change first, but let's rename it. And I'm going to show you a few examples in the same project, right? So I'm going to call this data grid view. And you will see why I called it. The data grid view uses, right? So I'll create a multi-form project because I mean, it doesn't make sense creating different ones. All I'll do is I'll change where I want to start. So I've called it data grid view. What a data grid view means is that you show the contents of a table in a grid, like a table. That's why it's called a data grid view. Okay, so I'll show you how to do it. So I've called it that, and once you say yes to this, it changes everywhere. Okay, so we'll do the usual. We'll go here, we'll change its and now what table will I be using? You could use any table. I'll just use the customer table. I'll call it customer table or whatever you would like to call it. Instead of table, you could use something like customer contents or contents of the customer table. I've just called it customer table because I know I'll be using it, right? And then we'll do the usual. If you want, we won't, and we don't like it coming anywhere on the screen, we'll show it in the center screen. We'll say the maximize box will be disabled because remember, it looks very untidy if we don't do it. What else do? We give a fixed border style. So this is the usual stuff, right? And then now I'll see how much I want. I'm not sure how much I want or how much I'll require, but something like this. Okay, now I want to show the content. Since I've said customer table, you could pick up anything, really doesn't matter. I'm just doing customer because that's what I kind of worked with or practiced, okay? Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to connect to the database I've given you. I'll include it in my project because otherwise, like if I give my application to somebody and it's not there, like how will he or she access it? Now, how do you do that? Please open up the data source window like I have it opened on my left-hand side. If you don't see it, if you don't have it here on your bar here, you can always go view, and you should be able to see it maybe in other windows. There it is, data sources, right? I want you to open the data source window if it is not already visible. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying now to connect. I'm trying to say what will be the data source of the data in my project. And this data source is the database I've given you. That's what I want to do. Okay, so I'll walk you through as to how I do it. Once you have this window, you should see an add new data source link right here. And if once you add a data source and you want to add another one, this link won't come, but there will always be a link somewhere here. Here it is. It's called add new data source. So you can use either of the links. When you're adding the first data source, you also see a link here, right here. But once you add one data source, if you want to add another database or another, then this link is gone, but you can always add it through here. So keep that in mind, okay? I'm going to add, I just have one database today, but that's what I'm going to add. Okay, so go add new data source. Click on it. A wizard will come up, right? What are we trying to do? We are trying to connect to a database. So there are other options of service, objects, and SharePoints, which we are not using in this application, but we are going to connect to a database. Say next. The only option you will see here is data set for now. That's all they have. And that's the only one we can connect. So this is the data set. These are the data set. It's the copy, not the copy. It is the collection of what you will take from your database and work within in your application, right? This is your data set. It has data tables, whatever tables you will need, whatever you need. You may take all the tables. You may work with all the tables. And you'll say, oh, no, if I don't need them and I change my mind afterwards, you can always configure your data set again. It's not a big deal. Okay. So just choose this. That's the only availability, and go to next. So just open this plus so that you can see what's going on here. You'll see once I make a connection, you will see the connection is written here. Now you're trying to say which data connection should your application use to connect to the database. I don't have a connection right now. So I'll say I want a new connection. So you can always configure or change this connection afterwards. Okay. So it says, what's your data source, right? Do you see a different window than me? Yeah, because I have said always use this. In that window that you see, this is what you see, right? This is a window. Choose this one. Choose this one, because I think I had said always use this selection. That's why it comes up. Now, what is the difference between, so you see a few options. Let's kind of quickly go through them. Are you going to work with an MySQL server? No. Are you going to work with an Oracle database? No. Are you working with a Microsoft Access database file? No. An ODBC data source? No. Here are the two that kind of work with you. Microsoft SQL Server, and the other one says Microsoft SQL Server database file. The difference between the two, you can bring your mouse over it and click on it. It says use this selection to attach a database. So you already have a database, like I've given you one, and you're attaching it. That's when you use it. If you had created the database right in your Visual Studio, right, like here on your local machine, you've just created it, then it says use this selection to connect to Microsoft SQL or above or to Azure using the Net Framework data provider. So if you create it right in your application, your database has been created by you using your own MySQL server, then we would use this option, right? That's the difference. So attach means it's already available and you're attaching it. And the other option, when you don't have to attach it, then you have it right in your own server. You know what I mean? It's right there. So attaching it will take it from wherever it is and bring it to your server. So we are going to say this one because we are going to attach a file, and that file I've already given to you. So do an OK. And once you have it, this is what it should say here: Microsoft SQL Server database file, SQL client. Now go and browse. Please leave this at use Windows authentication. So it's saying, how do you want to authenticate when you work with the tables in this database? Leave it here so that when you're logged onto your machine, the same authentication will work for your MySQL server. If you go and say use SQL Server authentication, then you have to give a username and password, and every time you use the local MS SQL database, this is what you will give. I leave it here because it's the easiest, right? It's my machine, it's my local machine, the server is right here. So the other option will be true when you're trying to connect to a remote server, because you will need a username and a password there, and that's what you will use. On my own local machine, I could do it, but I don't see the need of it. But you could, if you like, you could create. But when you installed Visual Studio 2015, you didn't give any password or anything. I don't think. I didn't do it. So I said, whatever, it's on my Windows machine, so it should work for me. And that's why I'm saying go with Windows authentication. Now go and browse and look for that file wherever you've saved it. Okay, wherever you've saved it. I know where I have saved it, so you should know where you've saved it. I have it at a few places. I'll just pick it up from wherever I know I have it. There it is. I have it. So just go and pick it up, right? The MMA dot whatever books.mdf that I've given to you. So use the newer version. If the newer version gives you a problem, then you will have to use the old version. I'm hoping the newer version will work for everybody. Or you could start with the old version and it will say, oh, that's not compatible. Do you want me to change it to the newer version? And say yes. Whatever works for you. That way you're kind of safe. So since I know that I need the newer version, I have opened the newer version and say, you can test the connection right here. Right, so you should have a succeeded. That means the file is okay, the format is okay, everything is fine. Right? Okay, so who's getting not what now? Not compatible with the newer one? Did you take the newer one? Okay, so then you need the old one. I've put that also on Blackboard. Do you have the same problem, Spencer?
Oh, no, it was slow.
It's just slow. Okay. Okay, good. So you should have a text test. So what version do you have, Joel, on your laptop?
I have 2015.
Enterprise, right?
I am not sure.
That's the one you took from our Dream Spark?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. So I wouldn't know, of course, right?
Let's see something.
So try the old one. Try the old one then, please. Because the new one must be compatible with Visual 2015.
Did the add connection window pop up? Like that one when you click new connection on the?
No. This one came up when I said test my connection.
Okay. No, I mean this.
This add connection box, yeah.
Okay, because.
You have the other one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so from there I chose the database file. Okay.
This one here.
Let's cancel it. Let's go new connection. So choose this one, database file. Yes, yeah. Okay. Now, yeah, exactly. That's the one we want, right? That's the one we want. We want the MS, we want the connection for Microsoft SQL database file because we are attaching a file. Okay, so you have to know what you are attaching. If you're using an ODBC database, then that's what you use. If you're using an OLE, that's what you use. If you're using an Oracle one, then that's what one you use. I'm using MS SQL, and we had two options for it. One was saying attach a file, and one was saying a file on your server. It already is there. So this is not on my server. This file is not on my server. When I attach it, now it will be in my server. Okay, so once you do it, test the connection, and the test connections should succeed. Only then will you be able to work with this example. And if not, try the old version, please. With the old version, you're safe anyway, Joel. What will happen is, if it is not the recent version, it will say, and you say yes, I want to.
So yes, I have to upgrade the database.
Yeah, say yes. So say okay, and try to do advanced. I think there is where it comes up. No, not here. No, not enough. Cancel it. Where did I change? Where did I try test connection again? That's all it says, right? That I went to that more information and I did it. Now I can't remember how I did it. It came up. Do I update it? And I said yes. So I went to that site they were mentioning and they told me how to do it. So maybe just follow that. Okay. So when you do an okay, take that, go to that website, and it will tell you there are just 3-4 steps. Okay, but that's strange that it says you have to update it. I gave you the newer version and it's not working with it. Anyway, you can update it. It's not a big problem. There are just 3 or 4 steps. Okay, there are just 3 or 4 steps. Do it. So and do an okay now. Okay, notice what it has done. Please pay attention to this connection string, which may seem a little Greek right now, but it's not so tough. See what it has done. It is saying that the data source is this file on Chawla Documents Visual Studio, wherever I've picked it up from, okay? And it is saying that you're using your local DB MySQL server, which is important. I want to draw your attention here. Please pay attention here that you're using a local DB MS SQL connection. And that's what it is. We're using one, right? So this is your connection string. If you like, you can change the name of your connection string if you like from here, but I mean, I'm okay with it. It's not no, not here. Sorry, on the next page when I do next, I don't see your name here. But this is something I want to draw your attention to, that a connection string has been created for you. This connection string has been saved for your information in this app.config file for you. So things are going on behind the scenes, but please understand where they are happening. Okay, so this connection is saved. Okay, let's go next. Now here is that's the question that came to you. It says the connection you selected uses a local database file that is not in the current project. Would you like to copy the file to your current object? I would strongly recommend saying yes. It will be copied. So what will happen is when I say yes here, you will notice that it will come here on your project. Notice it has come in your Solution Explorer window. Okay, it has come in your Solution Explorer window. I will talk about it in a minute when I come back here. But now notice here is the name of your string. Now, if you want, you can change it. Usually, it's just a good idea to keep it, leave it. Then you can recognize the connection string with the name of the database. So if you are connecting to more than one databases and they had the name of the database in front, it's easy to say, oh, this is the one that is connecting to this database. So it's up to you. If you want to change it, sure. If you don't want to change it, leave it alone. And it kind of tells me, yeah, I'm okay with this connection string, and say yes. So go next. Now it's saying, okay, now what do you want to retrieve from this database? Which tables do you want to retrieve from this database for your application? You have an option of retrieving everything if you like. Nothing stops you. Right? It depends on what you're doing in your application. Or for your information, you can always go back and retrieve it again. Nothing stops you. You can always change your connection. You can always say, I need more. So it's up to you. If you want to get everything, I will be using the customers table. I will be using the states table, I think. I will be using the invoices table. These three tables I definitely know I'll be using. I mean, and as I said, if you want to pick up all of them, you just say all and everything will come. Okay. If not, then you can always, and you have further option. You can go to a customer table, and if you're not interested in all the fields, you can remove the fields that you're not interested in. They can again be added afterwards. So you have a lot of options. Like, it really depends on what you want to do. Okay. So if you want to bring all the tables just in case, oh, I don't want to reconfigure it afterwards, I don't want to change it, it's up to you. But I think I'm going to stick with the three tables. So the three tables I'm going to stick with are the customer table, the invoices table, and the states table. That's what I'm definitely going to use. But as I said, it's not going to hurt you to bring all the tables into your application. It's not. And all you do for that is just click these tables and all the tables will come in. All tables, all fields of all tables will come in. Right? It's up to you. It's not a big deal at all. Please notice the name of the data set here underneath it. So please keep in mind, what is this data set? The data set is a collection of what you are getting from the database in your application. That's what it is. So if you were selecting the customer and the products table or the invoices table, that's what your data set is. Whatever fields you are selecting from it, that's what it is. Okay, that's how it works. Now there are a few things that when you go into and write database applications for Visual Studio, there are a few things that you have to know more about it. I'll just kind of introduce you to it so that you're aware of it. Remember, in a database, in tables, you could have default values. You could have, oh, this field default is this. Now with default values, Visual Studio doesn't work too well. You have to kind of do some extra work with it. You will either have to ask the user to give you a value for a default column, or you can set it in the properties, which is easy. But the default value definition automatically is not transferred from a table onto a data set. It doesn't say, oh, this field is default, so if the user doesn't enter it, it will be taken from the database. You have to tell it that it will be taken from the database. So some things, of course, as I said, it's just a first class we are doing on databases. But when you really work in the real life, then you definitely have much more than just these things. So I'm just taking all the tables, though I know I don't need them, just to show you. You can again change the name of the data set if you like. I'll stick to MMM books data set because again, it's quite clear to me. When you do finish, so choose whatever you like. I definitely need customers, invoices, and states today. I'm not sure about states, but the other two I definitely will need. Okay, I'll show you how to work with states also, and say finish. You will notice that you have, of course, I mean, if you had another one open here, which I will be opening my toolbox, so it doesn't matter how it is showing up, but notice how you have, just so that you can see more, not that I'll need it. Notice how you have in your data sources, your data set is defined, right? Inside your data set, because I copied everything, I have all my tables. And inside the tables, and another thing I would like to draw your attention to, notice in the customers table, there is invoices also. You'll say, what is this? The invoices table was separate. How is it showing this invoices here? If you remember that description that you saw, customer and invoices table were related to each other one to many. That's why it is also showing It's not the table, it's just showing you here. It's not a duplicate. It's showing you that the customer table has a relationship with the invoices table. That's what it is showing you. If you click on states, notice how the states table is showing you that the states table is related to the customers table. Why is it related to customers table? Remember, I mentioned that the customer has a state field, and in the state field is the abbreviation of the state, and the name of the state is in the states table. That's why they're connected. So if you kind of just these two, I know because I've used them. So notice how the invoices is coming as a subordinate to the customers table, and how the customers table is coming as a subordinate to the states table. All it is saying is it's showing you the relationship. So the invoice line items should have, the invoices should have the invoice line items as its subordinate. There it is. This is the same relationship that you've seen here in this table. If you've forgotten, here they are. Of course, you can't remember each something you see for once, and I just know it because I worked with it. Here. Customer is related to state, and that's why you are seeing it subordinate. Invoices is related to customer. Therefore, you are seeing invoices as a subordinate to invoices. Invoice line items is related to invoice. That's why you are seeing it. So that's why you are seeing those connections there. Okay, that's why you are seeing these connections here. So individually, they are individual tables. But if you kind of expand a table, you will see that it shows you what it is. Okay. So here are the tables. I've got all my tables into my data sets. Now, please bring your mouse onto your MMA MDF and look at its properties with me for a minute. It says anytime now there is an option here which says copy to output directory. Please select it. It says specifies the source file which will be copied to the output directory. What it means is anytime it will keep always copying. So there are three options here. There are three options here. The default is copy always. It says do not copy. Do not copy means once you are done with the application, you are not putting these changes back into the data. You are never copying it into the output directory. That's not what we want. But of course, if it's what you want in your application, what you can do it. The other one says copy always. So every time, whether you made any changes to your data set or not, the data set is copied back to your table. A lot of work if no changes were made. Copy if newer says, if you have made changes to your data set here in your application, when you exit your application, it will copy your data set to the table if it is newer. But anytime you do an update or delete, that's different. That when you hit save or update or delete or add, that's always happening. But this is at the end, like when you're finishing the application. When you finish the application, do you want to always copy? Do you want to copy if it is newer, or you don't want to copy? So I'll say copy if newer. So any changes that I make here in my data set, in my application, will go on to my database also. If I don't do any, just to be on the safer side. So I'll choose copy if newer. So if changes are made and I didn't do a save, for example, I forgot to hit the save button, it will copy. But if I've already hit save, then there's nothing to copy. Okay, so this is a safe one. Copy always, there is nothing wrong. It's just more time consuming. Why would you copy always if there are no changes? And do not copy will depend upon, I don't know, it will depend upon your application. You're just doing some changes here. You don't want it to be reflected in your database. So you have that option of doing it here. So change it to copy if newer if you want. If you really don't care, copy always is also okay. Okay, so just so that you know, these are the three options. Okay, now we are ready. We are ready to kind of start, except that we'll take a break now. Okay, it's 9:15, so we'll take a break. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to use these tables that you kind of copied into your data set. And also notice, no, not yet. They won't come yet. Sorry. They'll come after I take and show data on the form. I'm saying notice and I say, no, I haven't done that yet. So are we okay till here? Right? So what did I do? I created a project. I said I need a data source. So from where will be picking my data? I already gave you a database that was MSQL compatible. You attached that database to your project, and you're now using behind the scenes, your database management system is running on your machine, guys. The local DB MS SQL is running on your machine. Your system is Your local machine is a database server. It does run without you realizing it, right? It has always been running whenever you run Visual Studio. Okay, so we've kind of attached to it. I copied the database in my project so that if I have to give this project to whoever, it's right there. I didn't have to, but I did. Okay, and I have taken all the tables and kind of attached them to my project, to my form one, whatever I create in this project. Even if I don't need it, they're sitting there, but depends. You don't have to copy all, you don't have to attach all tables. You don't have to create a data set that has all tables, all fields. You can choose whatever you want. I just took it so that if I change my mind or if I need something, then I don't have to do it. You can always reconfigure it. You will notice here it is. So if you forgot something and you have to go and reconfigure it, all you do is this. And you change it and the changes will be done. No big deal, right? You can always reconfigure it. Okay, so we'll stop here. So we'll stop here and then take a break and then come back and then go further. Okay, so let's stop here.